incredibly high cattle and sheep prices. So how they're dealing with that, and if people have restocked, how they're dealing with, new bloodlines. And at the moment they're calving for the first time. So that's another aspect. But then
what's calving?
Calving. So if their cows are having calves at the moment.
Calving.
That's an accent thing. Yeah. So calving. And I mean, a lot of it's water management. We've got rivers that go all through, and there's always those arguments about who deserves what water and what should be left for the environment, what should be used for agriculture.
That's the big one going on right now. So next week sometime I'll interview somebody in the U.S. Like places like California might have 50 linear feet of water per minute, and now they have 0.5 linear feet. So it's like catastrophic water loss. When you're looking at the news and you're watching about what's going on in the world, what is your impression, people in Australia, of what's going on in the United States right now?
I mean, it has been unbelievable to watch the United States over the last few years and what's been going on. I mean, at the moment, there's quite a lot of envy to see you guys opening up in terms of from a COVID situation, because we're locking back down. So it seems we've, passed the baton there. But I mean, the media situation seems so much more extreme than what we see. We have it to some extent here in Australia, but nothing like what you have over there with that divisiveness and that language that people use, and the fact that people affiliate themselves with one line or the other. It's certainly such a level of extremeness there to everything. It's just that divisiveness in the country is what blows us away. I mean, that happens to some element here too, but I think our governments are much more, like the two parties are much more similar than the Republicans and the Democrats in the US.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was thinking about this the other day, that for a long time when I was younger, I didn't have like a strong political affiliation, and the idea that you would have a team or be on one side, like, yeah, you might lean more left or more right, but like not to some extreme. And now there's very, very, very few people that have some middle ground that they stand on. People choose a side and go towards it. And I think it's because if you don't choose a side, you're not going to win anything. You're going to lose everything. And it's much, much more polarized than I ever remember it.
Yeah. And I mean, we have the Murdoch press here as well. He was Australia's gift to America. And you definitely see that in some aspects of the press where there is a definite view, but nothing like what you see overseas, with Fox News and things like that. That's just absolutely extraordinary to me.
And what's Australia's relationship with China right now from your perspective? That's always been something we've been watching kind of just like distantly.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what is happening with wool and when they have, tariffs and things like that and arguments with us at the moment, they've been holding that over us in terms of grain and wine, and what an impact that has to our entire agriculture industry over here. I mean, we can pretend that we function without them, but they really can hold so much over Australia in terms of exports, and that has been difficult. I mean, people have been looking at things like wool and manufacturing and wondering, okay, if these relations continue to be so difficult with China, could we move somewhere like India? But it would just be so difficult to create that infrastructure, rehaul an entire system. So that reliance there and the difficult relations with the government as well. I think people get quite frustrated when the government does that because it doesn't matter for them. The government gets paid the same. But when that filters through to farmers and the money they can or can't make, and we've got so much wool just sitting in storage here that isn't being sold or isn't being exported. It's so difficult on that level for agriculture to, any decision the government makes is actually felt in the hip pocket here.
Yeah, I mean, Australia is such an interesting place because it's dry, so much of it like is not arable. The parts that are produce massively, but you don't have the consumption inside of your own country. So all the sheep that you have to go to the Middle East. All the wool, I didn't know it was going to China. And without export partners, Australia is on an island, and then there's nothing you can do with your stuff.
After going through the drought, goats have actually become much more popular because, you know, they're such a hardy animal and they cope through the drought so well. And the prices, people at the moment are getting better prices for goats than they would for sheep. I mean, they're going for $10 each, which is just incredible, particularly considering you can just harvest wild goats and make so much money, but so much of that is export. It's exporting that to India or the Middle East. And, you know, they say that the demand for goats is limited only by supply. It's just limitless. So those relationships, they're so important. And that's for some of the driest areas is where you see goats. And it's quite bizarre to us because we don't eat a lot of it. But the fact that, you know, it is so valuable and the demand is so high that it absolutely relies on those relationships going well.
You mentioned PETA a couple of times, and I've had some clients from Australia talk about how much of an impact those animal rights activist groups have had in Australia. I think maybe more profound than they are here. Talk about the animal rights activists in Australia. Is that just perception that they are having such an impact?
They've had some situations where PETA have been going onto properties. So they had a program where they could work out where people were and what they were doing. You know, they used satellite imagery to find properties and send out messages, and they're actually going into people's properties and protesting. So that has been very difficult because I think the extremeness of those actions that really creates a divisiveness between farmers and animal activists.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.